So you want to be OP? Well, I'm here to help. Alright, so this time we are playing Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions. A lot of this information is going to be applicable to the original Final Fantasy Tactics as well. But there will be some differences, and I'll try to point those out. So let's just load up. We'll just load up one of my games here. This one looks good. So a couple of things I want to point out actually first. Number one, I've actually modded my game. Really some minor changes. So not a whole lot to talk about there. But I also did activate an item code, I guess, to just get infinite items. So again, I guess keep in mind that you might not have access to necessarily all of the items that I do. But all right, so the first thing that I want to do here, it's kind of ironic that making an OP guide and then have infinite items. That's already pretty OP. But again, I actually wanted to do this because I think that some specific item combinations that don't require you to have infinite items can be really good. But what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to change the hero back to his squire job. I actually think that the squire is really good for the main character. Not only is his base, it's called metal in this version, so that base skill set's really good, but his equipment options are really good as well. I'm actually going to go with darkness. So guys, keep in mind that some of these abilities, again, aren't going to be available if you're only playing the original Final Fantasy Tactics. But again, most of them will. I'll try to point out, though, what's not. Specifically, already the Dark Knight is not available. So if you look here, so here's the Dark Knight. Dark Knights are really good. It's probably, maybe it's arguable that it's the best physical class. I don't know. I guess it depends on what you want to do. But anyways, all right. So let's take a look at the main character's not only abilities, but what he can actually do. Let's see if I've got. Okay, it doesn't look like I've got all of his abilities learned, so we can actually just take a look here. So he has basically all of the normal stuff that the squire does. So basically, every squire has the reaction ability, counter tackle, as well as these four. What are these? I guess just passive abilities. I don't know what that heading is actually considered. And then these are the movement abilities. So again, he's got all the regular squire stuff, but he does have a couple of really good extras. Probably the number one, I would argue, is Tailwind. So it says there, boost an ally's speed. I can't remember what this was called in the original Tactics. Yeah, I don't know. Chant is from, that's an original skill. That's not that great. Steal, Shout, and Ultima. So Ultima is, I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't really like the magic in this game, so I don't think that this one's as good as it might sound. Shout and Steal are really good, though. So Steal encourages, it says it encourages an ally, increasing their bravery. So again, this is a Ramza specific. Same with Shout. Shout increases bravery, speed, physical, and magical attack power with a hearty battle cry. So this is it's pretty OP. Unfortunately, he can only use that on himself, but it is really good. Again, though, I think that his best ability is Tailwind, again, just because it increases speed. Of all the stats in the game, I think that speed is the most important, or has the most effect on kind of like a battle. Just more speed allows your characters to act more often. So again, that's I would say that's the number one stat actually in this game, I would argue. Counter tackle I usually don't even bother with. Most of this other stuff I don't bother with as well, but JP boost is almost a must. And this is really for everybody. JP Boost I use almost exclusively the entire game as my, again, I don't know what this heading is considered. I think that's just, they're just passives that are always active. Obviously these are reaction abilities, so these typically trigger when something happens to you. Again, these are just always active. Beastmaster is pretty good in certain scenarios, specifically if you like to run around with monsters. And then move +1 is okay. It's kind of one of those abilities that you might as well get at the beginning of the game. It just lets you, move farther. Chemist, I'm not going to speak a whole lot about. I generally don't do anything with the Chemist job. I don't typically use items to heal myself, which is kind of what the Chemist job is based around. They do have the Treasure Hunter ability, though, so this discovers items hidden on tiles upon moving to them. So obviously this is a movement ability. There are certain battles where this is actually incredibly useful. They're kind of few and far between, though. I would say for probably 95% of the maps, this is not a useful ability. But again, for specific ones, it's pretty good. Throw items, safeguard, re-equip. Yeah, none of this stuff I'm usually all that impressed with. The Knight, let's just take a look at somebody else's Knight that hasn't learned everything. Let's see if I probably can't use her. Let's take a look here. Knight's got some really good stuff in it. Really, all these rend abilities, or most of these rend abilities are pretty good. So rend helmet, rend armor. So this is destroy your enemy's equipment. This stuff can be really cool too when combined with, say, like guns or bows. So say you've got a, I guess even like a chemist. A chemist would be pretty good. Chemist with the rend abilities using the, what is it? I think it's Arts of War is the Knight, skill set. But you can actually destroy your enemy's armor, shield, weapon, from a distance. So again, that's actually pretty cool. I think though, probably the best is rend speed, and similarly to what I had mentioned earlier. By reducing your enemy's speed, they just won't get turns as often. And oftentimes you'll be able to take, 2 different turns before an enemy will get 1 turn. So, again, some of these other ones are decent as well, but I think those are the best. Parrier, I wouldn't bother with. This stuff equips shields and swords, as well as heavy armor. I usually don't even bother with this stuff. I just think there's a lot better abilities. So that's the Knight. Archer, I think all the aim skills are pretty worthless. I don't ever use them. I just, generally anything with a charge time on it, I try to stay away from. It tends to take up more time than I want to, really spend on stuff. So I stay away from those. Anyways, Adrenaline Rush is one of the best reaction abilities in the game, and you might have guessed it, it's because it increases your speed. So anytime you take damage, you have the chance to trigger this. And this will give you +1 speed. So again, this is an amazing ability. Keep in mind though that all these abilities that I've been referring to, anytime that you're getting a speed increase from like a reaction ability like Adrenaline Rush or like from Tailwind, like Ramza uses. Those bonuses will disappear, essentially, at the end of each battle. So these are temporary bonuses. That's not to say that they're not still good. They're amazing. As far as the rest of these, there's nothing else I think that's worthwhile. Monk has some really good stuff. I want to talk about probably my favorite, which is Chakra. So it says restores HP and MP. The range is stealth and the radius is 2. So basically, anyone standing right next to you will get hit by Chakra as long as the height difference isn't too much. And that's the real downfall to Chakra. Is it's got some elevation issues. So again, it's great because it's free. It doesn't actually cost you anything to do this. And that's kind of why it's really good, I think. Again, because it's free. It doesn't cost you, it doesn't take any items to use this. It doesn't take MP. You can basically just use it whenever. So it's a great self-heal, but again, it can be good to heal your buddies as well, again, as long as the height difference isn't too great. Revive is the other kind of decent one. Same deal, it's got the same issue, though, with Chakra, where you have to be standing right next to the dead person, and you can't be too far below or above the target. Unfortunately, though, this one doesn't activate all the time, though, either. Or, I'm sorry, it's not always successful, so... and that will be determined by some different factors, which I'm not going to bother going into. But those are two really good abilities, I would say. First Strike here for reaction type abilities is great when you're fighting physical enemies or physical enemies that are trying to make an attack on you. The reason for that is not only does it damage your attacker, but it actually completely negates their attack. So it actually cancels them trying to attack you, and you'll attack them instead. Keep in mind, though, this is only for physical attacks, so anytime an enemy is casting magic type abilities on you, this will not trigger. Brawler, it can be okay, especially towards the beginning of the game where you don't have much as far as equipment. But that's not one that I typically go for. Life Font, that's another ability I don't think is worthwhile. White Mage, I don't think, yeah, none of these are good abilities in my opinion. Same with Black Mage. Again, I don't bother usually with much of the magic in the game, so keep that in mind when I speak about whether or not I think an ability is decent. Again, I really like to stay away from magic in this game, and it's kind of unfortunate because it's something like half of the classes in this game are magic based. But I think that physical attacks just far outweigh magic for the most part. You can do some kind of crazy stuff, especially with the arithmetician or the calculator it was called in the original Tactics. But again, that's another class that it can be really great, but it takes a bit of work to actually do well with. Anyways, Time Mage can be good. Shorten charge time. So if you actually do want to focus on magic type abilities, Swiftness is a pretty decent ability, just because again it reduces the actual time that it takes for you to cast your spells. Critical Quick is another really cool one too. So it says receives an immediate turn when critically wounded. So anytime you fall into critical by use of damage, your character will get their turn next. So that can be kind of good. I generally don't use that though. Summoner, yeah, same deal. I don't think really any of this stuff is good. Half MP, why bother? Critical recover MP, again, why bother? Thief, on the other hand, now here's where we start to get into some really good stuff. Steel Gill is garbage. I think it's really easy to get money in this game. But that being said, though, actually Steel Gill is kind of a decent way to kind of like, I guess, just gain JP and experience off of your enemies like really easily. It's just if your character doesn't have the accumulate ability, so accumulate is an ability from the Squire. Actually, I'm just gonna show you guys that real quick. It's actually one of the best abilities in the game. Actually, I guess it's called Focus in War of the Lions, but it increases physical attack power. It's self only. It fires immediately, so you can just spam this if you want to try to just, or if you're trying to build up your JP or your experience, either one or both. That's a great ability to just spam. But again, unfortunately though, for some characters they don't get that. Specifically your named characters or your non-generics, however you want to look at that. So Agrius, Meliador, Orlando, Beowulf, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, none of these characters get that accumulate ability. So oftentimes you have to get a little more creative with how you want to farm your JP. Alright, so next, let's find where we were at. Thief. So Steel Heart charms your enemy. It's not always successful, but none of these steel type abilities are. But it's a really great way to get gear. Obviously, steel helmet, steel armor, steel shield, weapon accessory, all that stuff. These are all really good abilities for when you're trying to get gear. Sticky Fingers. Here's another really great ability. It's not as good at the beginning of the game because you're just not going to run into many ninjas. And even when you do, they're not going to be really throwing good stuff. But there's some really cool kind of exploits later on in the game where you can like catch an infinite number of, say, knight swords. And you can actually get some of the best weapons in the game through that route, and that's really the only route to get those, or to get multiples of them. So again, I will say it, Sticky Fingers is one of the best abilities in the game for if you want to be kind of overpowered. Poach. Poach is another really good one, so that allows you to poach your monsters. You can poach your own monsters or poach monsters that you find out in random encounters. It's not my favorite way to get items, but unfortunately, it's the only way to get certain items. So, again, another really good ability. And then on top of that, so they get movement +2 as well. I generally stay away from the jump type abilities, but movement I really like. So the Thief is just packed full of really good abilities. Mystic, I don't think these guys have really anything that, yeah, this is nothing interesting. Geomancer oddly has the attack boost ability, which just says inflicts greater damage with physical attacks. So that can be good, because again, I tend to focus on physical attacks. Oops, gotta go back to Dragoon. Dragonheart. Dragonheart's kind of interesting. Basically what it does is it gives you the re-raise ability, or re-raise status effect. And that can trigger anytime an enemy makes a physical attack on you. The reason why that's good is because after one turn, as long as your character has that re-raise status, they'll just resurrect automatically. So this can be a really good one. That's about it for Dragoon in my opinion. Samurai, I don't think they have anything that I like. Double Hand is the opposite of dual wield that Ninja gets, where you use both of your hands, which says it increases its destructive power, which I don't think that's good. The first time I ever played the game, I actually used that a lot because I thought it was better than it really was. And the reason why that's not as good is because anytime you get the option to use kind of two pieces of gear, you might as well. So basically you're sacrificing either another weapon by use of dual wield, or you're sacrificing your shield, and I don't usually think that that's a worthwhile trade-off. Evade non-ranged physical attacks. No, this isn't. And Bone Crusher. Deal damage equal to own maximum HP when critically wounded. That actually sounds really good, but I actually don't like that in practice. Alright, so we're missing some classes on her, specifically the Ninja, so let's go into Ninja. The Ninja abilities, as far as throwing stuff, I generally don't throw anything. It just, it literally takes away your inventory items, which is maybe ironic that I'm saying that that's terrible when I have an infinite number of items, but again, normally I don't actually play that way, so these abilities I don't typically like. There's a interesting, I don't know if I would call it an exploit, trick, whatever, however you want to say it, with Gafgarian. So Gafgarian briefly joins your party for a couple of storyline battles very early on in the game, and what you can actually do with him is, as long as you've got a good spread of characters that have different jobs unlocked, you can actually get him, and again, it takes a lot of work, but you can get him to be a ninja, and then as long as you've got him a high enough level, you can actually make him throw things like night swords at you. And again, it's actually really early on well, sort of early on in the game, earlier than you would normally run into any ninjas, and thus you can get night swords, which I would argue are the most powerful weapons in the game, very early on. So it's a neat kind of trick. One of these days I've been meaning to actually make a guide on how to do that, so maybe I'll do that eventually. So stay tuned. But anyways, all right, let's move on. The reaction abilities. I think Vanish is one of the best reaction abilities in the entire game. So it can basically, or what it does is makes you invisible, and obviously the trigger there is any HP loss. So the reason why this is so good is because then enemies can't target you anymore. So basically you become invisible. You can still move around, but you can't take any actions. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that. You can take action still, but then you'll reappear. But there's some really crazy combinations with Vanish and things like the Dancer or the Bard. So dancers, what you can do is actually you can start a dance, and then if you take damage and you've got that Vanish ability, the Vanish will trigger and you'll go invisible. And then the dancer keeps dancing, and as long as you just keep using the wait command, you'll just dance forever and you'll be invisible. So again, absolutely crazy, borderline broken. Otherwise, so the other abilities that they've got that's really good is the dual wield, and we'll go over that here in a second. Obviously, it just lets you wield two one-handed weapons, one in each hand. Dancer I kind of already went over. Dancer is one of my favorite classes in the entire game. Specifically, really for mincing minuet here. Again, keep in mind that if you're playing the original Tactics, this name is different. I don't remember what it was called, but so this one does very minor damage, but it hits everything no matter where it's at. And that's the reason why the Dancer is so good, is because all of these different abilities hit all enemies no matter where they're standing, and no matter where height-wise or distance from the Dancer. The other dance that I think is really good is the slow dance. If you notice here, the speed is different. So mincing minuet is a really quick dance, whereas the slow dance takes a little bit more time to actually trigger. But this is another absolutely fantastic dance because there it says Dansu's sedate pace reduces enemies' speed. And anytime you can remove speed off of your enemy, I think is generally a good thing. Fury. So here's an interesting one where whenever you take physical damage, you'll increase your attack power. I actually don't really like it that much. Bravery boost is kind of decent though. So same deal. Anytime you take physical damage, it'll increase your bravery. The interesting thing about the bravery boosting abilities is they're semi-permanent. And what I mean by that is I think it's for every 4 points of bravery that you increase, you keep 1 point permanently. It works the opposite way as well. So if you drop 4 points of bravery, you'll actually lose 1 on your character as well. I think you can max out at like 97 bravery or something like that, just because once you get to that or those final points, you actually the maximum is 100, and you can't get to 98 or 99 or even permanently 100. But bravery is great for actually even mincing minuet. You'll do more damage the more bravery you've got. Hopefully I've got that right. I don't remember the actual formula for mincing minuet, but I thought it was bravery plus your actual physical attack stat. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that. I apologize if I am. Again, it's been forever since I took a look at these the formulas. But anyways, so now that we've talked about basically the most of the regular jobs and abilities that I think are worthwhile. We'll talk about the non-generic characters, and I'll just talk about my favorite ones. So I actually don't really like Cloud, oddly, even though he's a throwback from Final Fantasy VII. Reese is actually really good here. Abilities. Let's take a look. Actually, oh, and I can't take a look at her abilities right now because it's mastered. But she's actually not one of the characters that I use all that much. Although, so to be fair though, she's got insane growth. So statistically, she's absolutely amazing. Luso is basically an upgraded version of Ramza. Unfortunately, though, Ramza is stuck in your party for all of the storyline battles, so it's actually, it's just a little redundant to take Luso as well. The good thing, though, about him is he's got the innate poach ability, so if you want to, or if you're planning on doing much poaching, you might as well do it with him. His equipment choices are pretty good as well. I don't know if they're as good as Ramza's, but still really good. Agrius is my other. She's kind of my number 2, although Orlando really should be the number 2, or maybe even number 1. He's the most overpowered character in the entire game, to be completely honest. At least that's my opinion. We'll actually bring some of these characters into a battle here. Let's make sure I want to make sure I set everybody up though the way I want to wield. That looks good. Let's just change Agrius back to her Holy Knight. Generally, once you've kind of obtained the abilities that you want, I think it's usually always a good idea to change your enemy or these units back to their base units. Because they get the best, in my opinion, equipment options. There are some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, this is true. All right, so let's basically these top 5. These are the 5 that I always bring into my parties. This is my final crew that I like to use. So let's just make sure. So as far as basically all these characters have really good base abilities, I guess, or like their base ability skill set. So yeah, maybe we should say that the skill sets are really good. Oh, that's right. Oh, you know what? She's actually gonna be a better. Yeah, she's probably a better Dark Knight right now. Oh, I don't have it unlocked for her. That's why I don't have that. That's a shame. Alright, so Agrius, actually, at the end game, I would either have her as a Dark Knight or leave her as Holy Knight, but have the Dark Knight ability set as well. Otherwise, you could do like, that's martial arts, that's what it is. For the, chakra, it's a decent heal. Once you get to a certain point, though, you're just going to destroy everything, so it's going to be kind of irrelevant. We'll put dual wield on her. Unfortunately, because I don't have Dark Knight unlocked, I don't have move +3 on her, which is what the main character does have. So there he's got, move +3, and that's from, actually I think that's from Bard. So if your male units will get move +3 from the Bard, whereas your female units will get move +3 from the Dark Knight, and that's just kind of a goofy way of how they doled out the abilities between the Bard and the Dancer, unfortunately. But again, with the addition of the Dark Knight, they actually female units could never get move +3 in the original Tactics, but in this version of War of the Lines, they do get it again through the Dark Knight instead. So let's just set you up with dual wield. Oh, I haven't learned it yet. Womp womp. Let's do that, shall we? Dual wield. Alright. Oops. Dual wield, dual wield. So most of these I'm just going to leave a bravery boost on. Otherwise I would go with adrenaline rush, to be completely honest. And then, I don't know, let's go with martial arts on you too. Alright, so Orlando here is the real beast of the game. We'll talk about him once we actually go into battle, but Beowulf. Looks like he needs to learn. Oh, I can't learn dual wield with him because I don't have enough JP on his ninja. Oh well. Alright, we'll have to deal with that as is. Alright, so let's talk equipment. Generally, I always have specific setups for these characters. Most of the time, I would say it's a Chaos Blade in the main hand and an Excalibur in the offhand. The Squire here gets some really good, or sorry, I should say the main character Squire gets some really good equipment options. So this is actually going to be a little redundant. Let's. So in the original tactics, the Excalibur was the only piece of gear that had the haste permanent on it. But in this version of the game, you get the Brigand's gloves. There's some other options as well, but generally, for my accessory, I actually do tend to stick with those Brigand gloves. This isn't necessarily the best setup. There's the Durandal, but this is kind of what I like to go with. So I do the main hand Chaos Blade because it's got an attack of 40. It's got the regen on it. The effect stone is sort of irrelevant, sort of, but it is good when you actually just use the regular attack command. But the Durandal is really good here. Unfortunately, the attack is quite a bit lowered, but it does have the Protect and Shell on it, which is why I usually equip it. So basically what I do is have my main hand, my stronger sword, and then the offhand is more like kind of like stats, I would say. You can use shields as well, but for certain characters that's a good idea. But for most of my guys, I go this route. Now the Acacia hat here is I don't know how many you can normally get in the game. So keep in mind you won't necessarily always be able to have a bunch of these, but the reason why this is so good, again, it's got speed +2, and then it's got some immunities as well. Confused Berserk Charm is kind of nice. Ninja gear. Now, the HP increase to these obviously is tiny. It only gives you 20, but it does give you the +2 speed, and then it does make you invisible right off the bat. I think in the original War of the Lions you can get 2 of those, maybe more, but I want to say only 2. But those are really good. Otherwise, as far as other options, I think the Thief's Hat is always really good. And for the probably same reason as the Acacia Hat is it's got the speed +2. And then it is immune, or gives you immunity to immobilize and disable, so really good. I think those are the best hats in the game, though. As far as chess pieces, again, War of the Lions gives you some more options. One of those being the Mirage Vest here. It gives you the +1 speed, and then it does give you a decent amount of HP as well, and then some immunities, which I think are good. But the Brave suit, I don't know how. And the same deal. I don't know how many of these you can actually obtain legitimately throughout the game, but these are really good as well. Maybe it's obvious, but it gives you the re-raise status and regeneration. Re-raise is really good, basically on everybody. Just because if they get knocked out, you can just, or they'll just, resurrect automatically on the following turn, or on their following turn. So let's just talk about some gear setups if we don't have, infinite Brigand's gloves, because again, unless you're cheesing it like I did here, you wouldn't have these options. But for the females, I think Chantage is one of the best accessories because, again, it's got that re-raise status as well as regeneration. So normally, for Agrius here, I would equip something like this. Maximilian's probably fine. It looks like that's actually probably the best. A Lordly Robe is not a bad option, though, for her because it gives the Protect and Shell. And as far as helmets, she's got the all of the female accessories, so the Katyusha, which gives you a ton of different immunities. These unfortunately don't give you much as far as HP bonuses, but it gives you a lot of the status effect immunities. Same with the ribbons. Yeah, ribbons is probably the best. So that's probably what I would go with. And then as far as her haste option, I would go with an Excalibur for that offhand. And again, Chaos Blade in the main hand. So this is basically going to give you what, regeneration. It's going to give you haste. It's going to give you protect and shell, and then it's going to give you re-raise as well. So I mean, this is just a ridiculous setup. This is probably as good as you can even get. In my opinion, she's going to be a monster, and she's just going to keep coming back for more, even if she gets knocked down. So as far as Melee Duel, I would say it's probably pretty much the same thing. You can get an infinite amount of Chantage, which is one of the, one of the best accessories in the entire game. She, however, can equip the Ninja Gear on her base class, which I love. Unfortunately, though, she can't equip the Thief's Hats or, Akasha Hats, anything like that. So you're probably going to be stuck with, like, ribbons and stuff. And then again, same deal. Chaos Blade main hand, Excalibur offhand. So here's Orlando. Now Orlando is just completely broken. He gets basically all the best of everything. And then his base ability set is really good as well. So again, if you aren't going to use the Brigand's gloves on him, go with the Excalibur. Ninja Gear, Akasha Hat. Again, if you don't have enough Akasha Hats, you go with the Thief's Cap for the speed. Same with Ninja Gear. If you don't have, an extra one of those, you can go with something else, Mirage Vest, whatever. And then again, if you go with the Brigand's gloves, then go with the Durandal offhand. Otherwise, go Excalibur, and then kind of whatever you want here. You're generally going to want to go with something that's got some status protection for them if you feel like you need it. But I'll just go with Durandal because I do have that Brigand's glove. So Beowulf, unfortunately, though, it's kind of goofy with him because I don't have my dual wielding with him. But Chaos Blade, Escutcheon, this is the best shield in the game. Maybe that's arguable, but it's pretty great. Unfortunately, though, for helmets, he doesn't have the same options as like Orlando or the Hero, so he can't get that extra speed with his base class. So you can kind of go with some heavier stuff. Same with his actual chest armor, so same deal there. You're gonna have to go with something a little bit heavier. Accessory again, Brigand's gloves, unless you've got dual wielding, and you can go with Excalibur. So anyways, alright, let's go have a look at an actual battle here, and kind of what I like to do. That was quick. Alright. Okay. Again, this is my setup. So your heavy hitters are really going to be the sort of the main character. He can be, especially if you've already unlocked Dark Knight with him. If you don't have Dark Knight, unfortunately, he's going to be more relegated to either some sort of buffer, or you can have him just run around and just use the attack command. And by dual wielding, that's fine. That's a good option. Otherwise, again, with the Dark Knight, if you've got Dark Knight unlocked, he can be great. He can get some really useful abilities and do some really respectable damage. Orlando, so sword play is his command. So he's a combination of Meliadul, Agrius, and the Garfgarian or Gafgarian from the beginning of the game. He has all of their skills. So let's just go with Hallowed Bolt. It's no secret that Orlando is just ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, he almost did 999 to all those guys. So again, with the main character, if you've got the Dark Knight, he's got some great sword abilities, which I'll be completely honest, Dark Knight is probably the best addition to this game, in my opinion, just because of those sword abilities that it brings to the table. Beowulf here, I usually just keep him around for his status effects. The great thing about him is, so normally you would, or he's got a skill set similar to like the Mystic, with his Spellblade set here, and these again they're basically a lot of different spell effects or status effects, I should say. And the reason why I like him though is because he actually can equip this heavy armor, and still have all of these abilities. So there's a 100% chance to put him to sleep. Yeah, let's do that. Why not? Unfortunately, though, his abilities do take MP, so he can be actually a good candidate for something like the Lordly Robe instead. Again, I think anyway. I'm not. Actually, I can't remember if he can actually equip that or not. Hopefully, he can, because that'll bring up his MP stat. But Agrius here, so she's gonna get all of these skills. So I've got. So keep in mind, this is a. Oh yeah, this is totally tweaked out. So she's one of the characters that I tweaked her skill set and made her just stupidly overpowered. But anyway, she's got from here up. So Judgment Blade, Cleansing, Northwane, Hallowed Bolt, and Divine Ruination. She doesn't normally have the rest of these abilities, but I gave those to her because I thought she deserved them. Anyways, let's move up here. So let's just show you guys some Dark Knight skills, or why I think Dark Knight's really good. Sanguine absorbs HP, which is absurdly good. Infernal, not my cup of tea, but it does absorb MP. So that being said, if you can get your Beowulf and make him a Dark Knight and then give him that skill set, I would say that that's a good complementary skill set for his Templar, because again, if you're dishing out a ton of different status effects, you'll run low on MP, and you can just absorb it then with Infernal Strike. Crushing Blow here. Oh, add Stop. So, even looks cool. So yeah, so that's my setup for all these characters. Now, if you notice here, Orlando's already taken 2 turns in the time that, I mean, Meliodol hasn't even. There, she finally got a turn, and the reason for that though is number 1, she's level 1, and number 2 is her speed is only 8, whereas I think Orlando's pushing something absurd 18. That's so he's getting 2 from the hat, 2 from the ninja gear, and then 1 from the brigand's glove. So he's got a base speed of 13. That's likely because I leveled him a lot as a ninja, and Meliodol needs to do some leveling as a ninja in order to make up for her lack of. So my Meliodol here is tweaked as well. So basically what I did was I gave Meliodol Agrius, as well as, actually I should say those two basically have the same exact skill set as Orlando. For whatever reason, the skill set's absurd. The other great thing about Meliodol, or why I think Meliodol is actually useful this time around, in the original Tactics, she wasn't as good, or her base skill set wasn't as good because, unfortunately, to use her abilities, the enemy needed to be equipped with equipment, basically. So you couldn't use really any of her abilities on monsters because monsters don't wear equipment. Which again is really unfortunate, but that's one of the reasons why I really like this version of the game, is they changed that so that she would be able to use those abilities regardless of whether or not the enemy was wearing equipment. So I'll just try to showcase that here, or at least show you. But what would happen there with the original Final Fantasy Tactics is you'd try to use those abilities, and it would just deal 0 damage, which was, obviously pretty annoying, because they were. So I mostly like her sprite, which is probably why I lug her around. But I guess her story's okay as well, but she doesn't have that much character development. But again, she's got that a really good skill set, or it was potentially really good, depending on what you were actually fighting. But so she has all the crush abilities. Basically, it's these four. So it's crush, armor, helm, weapon, and accessory. And again, in the original tactics, if you tried to use these on monsters, they wouldn't do anything because they didn't have that specific gear. But the great thing about this stuff is, or those abilities, is as long as your enemy isn't using the, I think it's the, it's a chemist ability, and that prevents their gear from being destroyed. But even if they've got it, again, in this version of the game, she'll be able to still deal damage, even if they've got that. So that's that. That's about all I've got to say. Again, those are my picks for if you want to be OP, use those, or those are the abilities that I tend to stick to, as well as the gear setups. So hopefully this guide was helpful though, and hope you join me for more videos. Thanks for watching.